Lesson 2, How Economists Think. Hi, I'm Dave Arnott, the Christian Economist. Here's how economists think. First, they assume ceteris paribus. Well, this is a Latin term. You may be familiar with the par. Par means equal. Ceteris paribus means all else being equal. This is true not only in economics, but in every social science. We have to assume that the other effects are being held constant, is one way of saying it in economics. So think about it this way. As the price of coffee goes up, people buy less. Now, when I say that, you may be thinking, I know somebody who likes to pay more for coffee. Yeah, but that'd be an exception, wouldn't it? In general, when the price of coffee goes up, people buy less. And in economics, we always make this assumption. Don't find some outlying example way out there, some strange person who really likes to pay more for coffee, because that is not normal behavior. We assume normal behavior, ceteris paribus. All else being equal, as the price of coffee goes up, people buy less. The second way in which economists think is shown in the diagram in front of you now, called the social science iceberg. Now, I made this diagram myself, but it helps us explain social sciences. You'll see in the first diagram that on top of this iceberg floating out there in the ocean somewhere is something called a construct, and on the bottom is called concepts. Well, these words kind of explain themselves. Construct is something measurable. For our consideration, two things. Number one, it's measurable. We can assign a number. Number two, when you and I see it, we say, yeah, that's one. And that's why time is a good social science measure. When you see a minute, I see a minute. When you see an inch, I see an inch. So we agree about these constructs. But in social science, we tie those concepts under the water to the constructs above the water. Now the diagram in front of you has changed the terms to science and social. Science is above the water in our iceberg, and social is below the water in our iceberg. Here's a good example. One of my favorite economists is Thomas Sowell. One of his best books is called Wealth, Poverty, and Politics. All three of those terms are concepts. They're all below the water. How do you measure wealth, Mr. Sowell? How do you measure poverty, Mr. Sowell? How do you measure politics, Mr. Sowell? You do it using numbers above the water. And that's why the social science iceberg is so important for us. Let's use just one more example. You've heard of this term love? How do you measure that? So let's say you have love between a married couple. How would you say one couple in your church group is more in love than the other? How would you come up with measures? This is the difficulty of social science. This is the difficulty of economics. How do you define wealth? How do you define love? And so we make this agreement when we think as economists that we measure concepts below the water with constructs above the water. Or you're welcome to see the diagram as social below and science above. The third way in which Christian economists see the world is called the Christian Worldview. Okay, this probably demands its own lesson, but I'll do it very quickly today. The diagram in front of you is showing the three elements of the Christian worldview. We believe God created a perfect world. Fallen humans have messed it up. We believe we can find redemption through Jesus Christ. Some people will call it the three-chapter gospel. And some people will add a fourth, which is resurrection, when Jesus comes back. I have no disagreement with the four-chapter gospel. It's just I tend to like the three-chapter gospel when teaching economics. So in economics, we assume that when God made the world, it was perfect and there was no scarcity. When Adam and Eve ate the apple, that's when scarcity came about, which I talked about in lesson 1. And that's where economics is born. Without the fall, there's no scarcity. Without the scarcity, there's no economics. Our view in Christian economics is that we are viceroys of our God, and our job is to figure out how to take these resources that we have and a limited ability to change them into value for our fellow citizens. That is, in a very quick sense, the Christian worldview, and that's how Christian economists think. The fourth way in which economists think is called two directions, positive and normative. So positive economics are how the world really is. Normative is how it should be. Let me give you a two-word phrase. Taxes will. Okay? 2 words. See, taxes, we ask the question, normative. Is that right or wrong? Should we tax or should we not tax? So that's a normative question. When you ask the word will, taxes will, now you're asking a positive question. What will happen? What will be the end result? So we have two ways of looking at economics, and I call them two directions because positive looks back. When you increase taxes, what happens? We know in the past. That is positive economics looking backward. Normative economics looks forward. It says, if we increase taxes, what will happen? And this is at the heart of Christian economics because Christians are concerned about normative. Christians say it's either right or wrong to tax in this particular example. Economists will say, what is the outcome of taxing? So now you're getting on the horns of this dilemma of Christian economics, which is really fascinating. Positive and normative economics. Two levels, micro and macro. Micro means small, macro means large. So microeconomics is at the firm level. It is mostly setting prices. I mentioned earlier about coffee. If you raise the price of coffee, you'll make more per unit, but you'll sell fewer units, won't you? You can go the opposite. If you lower the price of coffee, you'll sell more, but you'll make less on each unit. In 30 seconds, that is microeconomics. Because microeconomics studies the firm level. How do they set prices? Macro, that's macroeconomics, means large one. And so it's at the national level. And so the diagram in front of you now is showing what I've called the macro model. It shows that there's two entities working in macroeconomics. On the top of your diagram is the government. The government can do two things. It can tax and spend. In the bottom of that diagram is the Federal Reserve Bank, which is our central bank. It can change money supply and it can change interest rates. That is macroeconomics in 1 minute. Production possibilities draws on lesson 1 where we learned about opportunity cost. If you're watching this podcast, you can't watch another. If you go to Disney World, you can't go to Disneyland. See, if you attend one university, you can't attend another. When you're in an economics class, you can't take another class at the same time. So we assume that you as an individual, as a student, you have a production possibilities curve, as we call it in economics, and you can't work outside of that. You're mostly limited by time, but your professor is limited. Podcasts are limited. Production possibilities say how much can we produce. Now in later lessons, we'll learn how to expand the production possibilities curve. But for today, we're assuming that you can only do a certain number of things. See, now as you're thinking as an economist, this is starting to make sense for you because you're thinking there are limitations, there's scarcity. And how do I use these resources that God has given me? That's lesson 2, how economists think. I'm Dave Arnott, the Christian Economist. See you next time. For more information, please visit us online at davearnott.com. If you have questions or suggestions for future podcasts, please submit them online or in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.